We know that effects of natural disasters won't just impact children, that of course it affects all of us. Even people who aren't directly impacted will be affected through hearing about those who are, and we will all experience some level of distress. As human beings, we are social creatures, and these things impact us. And so therefore we would expect that educators will also be impacted, and they may have had direct impacts through their own personal losses, as well as hearing those around them. And again, it's really important that we look after ourselves first, that each of us make sure that we're okay before we try and help the next person.
The practice of relationships really underpins all of the work that we do in early childhood, and we need to remember that that actually applies to our colleagues and our families as well as children. So that practice of relationships tells us that we need to look at an individual level, at our staff and at our family and at our children. So understanding the individual circumstances that each of your staff members have gone through is actually critical for your planning and supporting of them into the future. Think about each individual's capacity. What training would they like? What supports do they need? Where are their areas of interest and passion? What are going to be the triggers for anxiety and stress for them, depending on what they've been through? Everybody has a story, and it's really important that we take the time to listen to this.
There'll be instances where you're concerned for the well-being of one of the staff members, and at these points, again, the general principle of look, listen and link, in terms of that idea of psychological first aid, would be relevant here. You'll be observing and noticing these things. You might have a quiet word about how they're going. Again, just trying to help them to express it, make sense of it. But then it may be also important, depending on the level of distress they're feeling, to link them with services. And that could be as simple as them making contact with the GP, to then, who may then make an onward referral to a psychologist or a social worker, somebody that is expert in the area of some of the impacts of traumatic events.
You may notice that one of your staff members is in a heightened state of anxiety or grief. You may know their story, you may have heard of their personal loss or response to the bushfire crisis. It's really important that we've done that groundwork where we've actually stopped and looked and listened and heard somebody, so that we know where they're potentially at risk or vulnerable. So the next step in supporting somebody is actually identifying when they may need some help outside of the service. So you might start with making sure there's wellbeing breaks. You might start with making sure that everybody takes their morning tea or their lunch, or is drinking during the day, has access to be able to make important calls if they need to. If they're rebuilding a house or they have family that they're still concerned about, small measures like that on a day-to-day basis can really help support somebody's mental health and well-being. But it's also critical to know when the level of support required is beyond what we can provide as a colleague, as a director, as a member of a team, and when to have that sensitive conversation. So critical things to remember are finding the time and space. There needs to be a private space, it needs to be confidential. You need to be mindful that that person may not be ready to hear that information because they're trying to cope and feeling like they're coming to work and coping. And if the others around them notice that they're not, that could be a bit confronting. So think really carefully about how you would have that conversation in a sensitive way, and have the resources at your fingertips to refer somebody to. Don't forget that we aren't positioned to answer all of the questions and to solve all of the problems like a psychologist, but we can certainly be the helping hand there and direct people to their GP, Lifeline and other resources available in the community.
Within the workplace, there may be various people, staff members, who could be struggling as well as the children. We're just going to keep a weather eye on everybody really. Including ourselves, of course. Signs of struggling would be being preoccupied by whatever the threat is, and so it's very hard to keep it out of your mind. And so you know on a personal level if you're preoccupied, but in terms of seeing that sign in somebody else, they may be talking about it a lot, all conversations would lead back to it. They could be also just very restless, like they can't keep still. Alternately, they could be very withdrawn. So it can go either way, but there's a sign that there's a change. And again, as a fellow staff member at those moments, we're just going up and asking, how you doing? And inviting the other person to just let us know how they're doing. And that might be enough. For a lot of people, just that little chat, and then they're good. They take a breath, they restore their sort of sense of calm and safety, and they can go on. But for some people, they may need some professional help. And then we could be that first person to help them just think about it. We don't have to tell them. We can just say, you know, would it be helpful to get some other help? And then they can think about what sort of help they might like.
I think in hindsight, we reflected on what we could do better and if we failed or let anybody down or anything, because it was nobody knew it was going to happen, and it happened very quickly, and then we all just had to act as though we'd been there, done that, and knew what we were doing. So in hindsight, you know, when everything settles and you can think about it, we have now implemented an employee assistance program, which I think if other services can do would be really beneficial. Not only for the actual counselling options that it gives people, but also just that show of support to staff and that demonstration that we're invested in you and interested in your well-being.
And that well-being is a very important part of what we do. And I guess also for us was that we were giving so much emotionally that it's really important. And I don't think we knew that at that time. Back in 17, I didn't think we understood how important well-being is to an educator's ability to be provide a safe and secure environment for children and families. But I think we do now, and I think that that is key to maybe why we have a really strong team as well. So.